Coach Walden, Jim Walden, he was a quarterback, and he played at Wyoming and then had a, 4 or 5 year run in the CFL. Broke a bunch of records and stuff, but we won't get into that. He began his coaching career as an assistant at Nebraska, then he went to Miami, and then he discovered God's country. And Jim went to Washington State University. Go Cougs.
Go Cougs!
And from there, Jim was promoted to head coach from 1978 to 1986. And then, because of a change in administration there, he ran off to Iowa State, and was head coach there from 87 to 94. Two-time, Lindsay, two-time Pac-10 Coach of the Year. That's huge.
Yeah.
You will find out soon that he's a very entertaining sort. And so after that, he did radio with Bob Robertson for the Cougs. And I've talked to Lindsay about this before. He did some radio advertisements, and there's one that just kills me. And it's for this hotel in Spokane, and he would go, "Well, go on down to the intimate and elegant Hotel Lusso." I just love the way he said that. It did not sound intimate or elegant. And not because it's intimate, but Rob and I stayed there once. And the reason we stayed there, this was proof that advertising works, was because of these crazy radio ads that just cracked me up. Anyway, Jim is a super solid gentleman in everything he does and in every way, and he's become a good friend to Horizon Realty Advisors, so let's give him a big round of applause.
Well, thank you very much. It's I deserve all of that. Before I go any further, I want to tell you that I hope your business works a lot better than your singing. Well, I want to get you in a bad mood to start with. But also, really seriously, I want to do this with Greg here too. I want to thank Vanessa for being such a great lady to deal with. Let me take this off. I've got some things written down here, and I just want to say this. It's nice for me to be here. And when you get my age, hell, it's nice to be anywhere. And I think I'm supposed to be a little bit of comic relief and a little bit of motivation. So with that said, I thought I'd just pick on my age a little bit. And there was a couple of old guys sitting on a park bench, and John said to Slim, John says, "I'm 80 years old and I got aches and pains all over. How about you?" And Slim says, "Well, yeah, I'm kind of like a baby. I got no hair, no teeth, and I think I just wet my pants." There are three old guys walking, and show you how life is at our age. One of them says, "It's windy." Second guy says, "No, it's Thursday." Third guy says, "Me too, let's stop and get a beer." And you'll see one of these days, and you deal with that. But I'll finish this with a doctor and one of his patients, elderly patients named Morris. Morris went in to see the doctor and got a physical, and a few days later, after the physical, the doctor sees Morris, and he's walking down the street with a beautiful young lady on his arm. And he goes up to him and says, "Gosh, Morris, I'm glad to see you doing so well." And Morris says, "Doc, I'm just doing what you told me." He said, "What's that?" Morris said, "Well, get a hot mama and be cheerful." Doctor said to Morris, I said, "You've got a heart murmur. Be careful." Now I'm going to tell you a little story about, well, you'll see the end of this one. There was a teacher in the 6th grade, and she had a little time left in her class, and so she thought she would have the kids stand up and kind of say what they'd like to be when they grow up, just like you all grew up to be Horizon Realty people. That's what you wanted your whole life. You grew up, it was just embedded in you, I know it was. You look too happy not to be. So anyway, the teacher got up, and I'll read this to you so I don't screw it up. But I had a few minutes left, and so she said, okay, would you each one jump up and say what you'd like to be when you grow old? So Johnny Newhouse, you've always got a Johnny Newhouse. Isn't that amazing? You've always got a Johnny Newhouse in your class. And he jumped up and says, not only do I want to tell you what I want to be, teacher, I'm going to do it in rhyme. And the rest of the class goes, okay. So he says, when I go to Japan, when I grow to be a man, I'm going to Japan. If I can, and I think I can. Well, this went over real big. So Freddie Apperson jumped up. And he says, when I grow to be a man, I'm going to Alaska and hunt gold with a pan. If I can, and I think I can. Well, immediately in the corner, Roberto Chavez jumped up, waved his hands and said, when I grow to be a man, I'm going to Mazatlan and play in a marimba band. If I can, and I think I can. Well, immediately, you know, the women got to have their say, so all of a sudden Susie Westover jumped up, and she said, when I grow to be a lady, I'm going to have a baby. If I can, and I think I can. Well, way back in the back of the room, Greg Bickle was waving his hand. And that made the teacher nervous, but she thought he hardly ever raised his hand, so I'm going to call on him. So Greg jumped up and says, when I grow to be a man, I'm not going to Japan. And I'm not going to Alaska and hunt gold with a pan. And I'm certainly not going to Mazatlan to play in a marimba band. I'm going to stay home and help Susie with her plan, if I can. And I think I can. There you go. I have one more story, then I'll get down to some serious stuff here. As serious as I'm going to be. There was a nun, and bless her heart, she was dying. And so all the other nuns were around and comforting her. And they asked her, says, you know, sister, can we get you something? And she kind of shook her head in a very feeble condition. Well, one of the nuns jumped up and ran to the kitchen and warmed some milk and brought it back to her. And she took a little swallow but just didn't want it. And they were very concerned. So the same nun took the milk, went back to the kitchen and realized that over the holidays somebody had left a bottle of Irish whiskey. So they put the whiskey in the milk, warmed it up, and brought it back to the sister. And they said, sister, would you try this one more time? And the nun took a swallow. Then she took another swallow. And then she drank the whole thing. And her eyes brightened up. And they realized that it really had an impact. And so all the other sisters said, sister, we're so happy to see your eyes brightening and you're feeling better. Would you tell us something in your waning hours that will help us? And the sister looked up at him and says, whatever you do, don't get rid of that cow. It'll catch on. You'll get in there. When Greg called and he said, okay, what are you going to do? And I said, well, I promise not to pick on the Huskies. But I will say a couple of things. There's something I do want to share with you, and I'll read this to you. I saw this the other day that I heard it, Chris Peterson and Mike Leach. In case you don't know, they're the two head coaches at Washington State. Some of you that are outside, I was talking to a young lady from Denton, Texas, and hell, she doesn't know anything that's not outside of Texas, I mean, right? I mean, all the world starts with the Dallas Cowboys, and then we get to Houston, and then we get to the Texans, and then it's just Texas. That's all. And I love Texas, I do. But Chris Peterson and Mike Leach were talking about traditional values. And Peterson said to Leach, "I didn't sleep with my wife before we were married, did you?" And Coach Leach says, "Well, I'm not sure. What was her maiden name?" That's traditional values. And I'm not going to tell you that once upon a time when I was the head coach at Washington State, Don James and I had a pretty much ongoing deal. And he had one of the greatest lines, because I did talk a lot. But you have to, if you're a Pullman, you better be talking a lot, because nobody knows you're over there, okay? You know that, so you Cougars, and so I was pretty outspoken. They asked Don James one time, we're going to have a session on TV together. And Don James came with one of the great lines, and everybody used to say he wasn't that funny, but he did have a great sense of humor, because I have to think a lot of it. We spent 2 weeks together for 8 years, and then we split up after 2 weeks, come back and say, okay, now let's go back to hating each other, because that makes our fans feel better. But Don James says, if I'm going to be on the same podium with Walden, I'm a 2,000 word underdog. And he was. So what I would say to Don is in one of the big events, what do you have if you cross a pig and a husky? Nothing. There's some things a pig won't do. You'll figure it out. All right, what I want to do is I'm going to take some time now and tell you, and I hope I don't bore you to tears, but when I talked to Greg and talked to Vanessa, I went back through your pledges of excellence, your pledge of excellence, and I kept thinking about how close that was. So I want to give you one little bit of history so you'll know where I'm coming from. When I took the job at Washington State University, I was the 4th head coach in 4 years. Not the 4th head coach in 20 years, the 4th head coach in 4 years. There was a head coach there in 75, 76, 77, and then me. It would be like in your business, I think, if you had 4 CEOs or 4 bosses, one right after another, after another, after another. You can only imagine. He's changing this, he's changing that, who's doing this? Ah! So what we found was beyond your wildest dreams. So I looked at your pledge of excellence. Number 1, we provide superior customer service. HRA leads the industry in customer service. We go above and beyond. Always strive to impress. Always follow up. Always remember who you are. You get what you give. Give everyone the respect you want to receive. So with that said, I'm going to give you my version of what we dealt with using those terms. Coaching staff, have a plan. 4 years it took. I had to put together stuff. I've never been a head coach. I was in high school, but I've never been a college head coach. So now I've got to put a staff together. Never know how to do it. Never had to do it. And on top of that, when I get a staff together, I've got to organize a plan. You've got to have a plan. Our best chance to win. First thing you do, you get a staff together, it's recruiting season. You get the job in December, everybody's hustling, man, you got to get out. We didn't have a soul. We didn't have an early commitment. We didn't have a single guy. And we got to go find 25 football players that will help us win games as we move forward. So you better have a plan. You better have a plan. I'm using your excellence to tell you what we did. We had a plan on offense. You got to have a plan on defense. You got to have a plan for special teams. You got to hire people that you believe can help you with those plans. You got to aim high and don't be afraid to miss. It's a hell of a lot better than aiming low and hitting. We're at a school that was in some ways an athletic embarrassment in football. Not because of what it had or had not accomplished, but it's a joke whenever you can't keep a coach. He comes, he goes, he comes, he goes, he comes, he goes. That's what we heard everywhere we went. And yet we're out trying to talk somebody's son into coming and playing football for us. And every home I went into, they'd say, Coach, you going to be there a while? Well, you knew where that was coming from. So it's part of the plan. You better have one. We adjusted. We aimed high. 4 years later, we went to the first bowl game in 53 years at Washington State University. I give all the credit to the guys who took the chance to come with us based on that. Don't be afraid to change. Even in the middle of your plan, things happen. Practice times, different things. You relate to what you do to what I'm telling you now. A practice time is a major deal for us. It's a major thing. When do we practice? How long do we practice? It was really important that we do it right. Uniforms. No Cougar had ever worn an all crimson suit in their lives. Nobody. They wore crimson, they wore gray, and they wore white, and they wore crimson, and they wore gray, and they wore gray. Yeah. But we're getting ready to play the Huskies one time. And one of our coaches said, Coach, we're talking about what you meet in your rooms because you have a team. And one of our coaches says, Coach, some of our players would think it'd be great if we could wear all crimson against the Huskies this week. I thought, why not? So we went out and warmed up with gray pants on and a crimson shirt and a crimson hat. I beg your pardon, with a gray hat. Well, we went into the dressing room. Now here we are, one of the biggest ball games you ever play at Washington State. Now I know Coach Leach a little bit about Huskies stirs me up a little bit because he says it's just another game. It's not just another game. Well, I'm serious. Army and Navy is not just another game. Texas and Oklahoma is just not another game. There are games and then there's games. So we go in and we dress. We get them all on. The kids are so pumped up. There was no words I could have ever said that would have made a group of guys get more excited than taking their pants off and putting new pants on. Now I know, speaking, sometimes men over the years have gotten into trouble taking their pants on and off, and I won't go there. But in this case, it was a marvelous thing. And we came out and upset one of the best football teams at the University of Washington. Did it have something to do with change of uniform? Yes, I'm sure it did. So I say to you, don't be afraid to change. Change conditioning. We even one year went so far as to change our whole conditioning period. Kids, athletes are so accustomed. I know Rob has played basketball, and athletics are so much, let's practice and then we'll condition. Well, we got the idea, let's condition first. It broke our players' hearts. Because, see, all the players want to go through conditioning, go through practice, and then they want to say, Coach, my shoulder's sore, I don't need to run today. But we changed that, and it was the best thing we've ever done. Now they've even gone, University of Oregon started it, I think. Practice it in the morning. Can you imagine that? Getting all the schedules for the football players afternoon. They practice from 6 in the morning till, say, 9 in the morning, or 10 because they have an hour meeting. Went over marvelously with the players. Actually, they got used to it. So don't be afraid to change. We are market leaders. Lead the market, rental rate, and occupancy. No one becomes a market leader alone. Teamwork makes the dream work. Work harder for bigger rewards. I used to tell one year we were really struggling with our football players, to try to find a way to motivate them during the off season, which is a nightmare for football players. Now you have to understand, I coached in the era when kids were not there 12 months of the year. We sent ours home. And if I was coaching today, I would send them home if they wanted to go in the summers. I personally don't believe, when I saw a wide receiver's mother say, his name was Sweet, And his mother said, when I sent my son to college, I didn't think I would never see him again. Because college football has got to the point where they dominate. It's just over and over in this 12 months year. I could never do that. Not in a million years would I want to keep young people. If they wanted to go home, they could go home. When they come back, it's an exciting thing to talk. So that's part of working harder. You get a bigger reward. And so I came with this idea. Why don't we have our players, everything we do, we're going to start and end the session with the term, and I got to make sure I say this right, physically tough, mentally tough, tougher than anyone. Because when you're playing a USC in our league in those years, in our national champion caliber, and you're playing the University of Washington, and you're playing two of the best teams that are in the United States, you have to express upon your players, they got to not just be out there grunting, they got to be mentally tough. You have to accept that. It's going to be damn hot sometimes when you don't want to be out there. And I say this all the time for football. It's the only sport in the world where it's either too hot, too cold, or raining. Think about it. You don't go indoors. We didn't. You do everything outside no matter what the weather. Now they're all getting spoiled because they have indoor facilities now. And so, but we wanted to be that. I wanted it in their brain. Mentally tough. Physically tough. Don't be afraid to give it all your all. And it'll make us tougher than anyone. And it worked because the kids loved it. They loved the thought of doing it. It's back to what you do. No one becomes a market leader alone. Teamwork makes the dream work. No pain, no gain. You've heard it your whole life. That applies to you. Hell, it's not just an athletic thing. You have pain involved with what you do. There's pain involved with what I do. Getting up every morning is painful. Lead the league in something positive. That's what we told our kids. Helmet stickers. What is a helmet sticker? You see those things? You ever seen Ohio State? They got those Buckeyes all over the place. Well, whatever you can use that would apply to a helmet sticker is simply this. Helmet stickers are one. They're up there because of the excellence of that individual doing something that his coach has said, if you do this and accomplish that, you will get this. And the more of these you get, the more people will notice. And if you don't think it has a motivating factor, you're crazy. I mean, we'd have Monday session for the sticker. The Monday afternoon practice, our very first thing was to issue the stickers. Oh my God, you'd think you'd won a national championship. Would you say, okay, here's, for this, we'll give this to Cleet Casper for quarterback. He completed 17 of 24 passes for 218 yards. He gets 2 stickers, one for most completions and one for da-da-da. Yeah! And the more they got, the more they wanted. And when they didn't get one, it's like, oh, what the hell, coach? You know. So there's some downside. And I want to finish this page, we are market leaders, with this. If not now, when? You've heard it your whole life. If not here, where? If not me, who? So think about it. Do you think about that every day? You should write it and put it on your desk. Whatever you're going to do today, are you going to do it? Or are you going to have somebody else do it? If you're not going to do it here, when the hell are you planning on doing it? And if it's not going to be you, who? Every day I went to work, that was my motivating factor. I wanted to make sure my coaches understood that I knew that I was here today. It was going to be me, and we're going to do it here, and we're going to do it right now. Because if you put it off, and you start handing it out, first thing you know, you're losing. Number 3, we take pride in our exceptional property appearance. HRA properties are the best every day in every way. Landscaping sets the tone. Make it green, make it gorgeous. And I'm going to tell you what a lot of people never knew I did. You always ask, you hear coaches all the time say they do everything for winning. Winning is all they care about. I'm not arguing that. It will keep you employed. Trust me. Winning is better than losing based on your next paycheck. But while I was a coach, and I step away from here to tell you this, I did something I thought, I'm from Mississippi. And I was born and raised in a little old one-horse town. And you hear a lot of people make fun of Mississippians, and they're rightly so, at times. But the one thing I was taught my whole life was to be respectful of my elders. I was around it my whole life, I saw it my whole life, so it was the most natural thing in the world for me to say, yes sir, yes ma'am. And as I grew older in coaching, I began to realize that a lot of reputations, you're all about reputation here. And whether it's a good one or a bad one is up to you guys. But in most cases for football players, it's bad. Football player never goes to class. You never see those guys in class. Well, how the hell they all pass? On one hand, you'd hear someone say, this is a tough school. And then the football team's GPA is 2.85. And then the next person you hear somebody say, well, they don't ever go to class. How the hell do they get a 2.85 accumulated in this tough school if they don't go to class? It's a joke. It's a reputation. They also had reputations of being, a big 6'6", 285-pound guy will scare you to death if you're just an average person. So a reputation of being like animal types. So what did I do? And I agreed. I watched all of my guys. I started watching them in the chow hall and other places. And it dawned on me, my football players didn't know a hell of a lot about manners. And you know what? I decided, as a football coach, I had the time. And every Sunday of a home football game for my entire career after my second year there, we had what we call self-improvement classes. Just me, just them. I didn't want my assistant coaches in there. I didn't want any managers in there. I didn't want any trainers in there. I wanted honest, open dialogue. So if they had a funny joke, which they all going to do because they got sense of humor like you can't believe it. We had classes on how to dress for success. So I would bring in someone to show them, when you get out of college and you're not going to be in the NFL, how do you dress for success? And you don't have but a limited amount of money. Buy a blue jacket. Buy a pair of gray slacks. Maybe buy 2 pair of slacks that goes with the same coat. It went through this whole thing of how to succeed by dressing for success. We talked about manners. I had some lady come in and put a place setting in front of them. Do you have any idea how many guys don't know what all those forks are for? You're okay with it probably. You've been taught. Maybe you sit down in a place setting and you see all these instruments and all these things. But a lot of my football players hadn't. I had to tell them, where do you put the napkin? Don't put it in your neck. This is not spaghetti night. Okay? So I did these things, table etiquette, manners, how to deal with, I even had a session, I will tell you one funny story. Talked about how to walk with your lady friend. Simple thing, always walk on the outside. Now, that didn't necessarily mean anything today, I don't know, but it did to me. When I'm walking with my girlfriend, I'm not walking inside, I'm out here on the side by the street because that's where the danger is. Now that's not the reason you do that. In the old days, the reason that was the way you did it was because of the wagons in the mud. That was courteous for you to walk outside so the mud wouldn't splash on your girlfriend. But my guys didn't know that. And I don't know if it was a big deal, and I talked about opening the door for a young lady. Don't walk in front of, open the door and walk in and leave the door slammed in front of this woman behind you. Well, so I challenged my guys to do it. I said, next time we meet, I'll ask for responses. Well, sure enough, we go through the whole thing. Yeah, it was a great one. Oh, wow, Coach, I got a date because of it. You know, all such as that. And then the one kid said, I got my ass chewed because of it. And he said, what's that, Charlie? He said, well, I opened the door. And the girl said, to hell with you, I can open my own door. I said, well, were you nice? He said, yeah, I told her. I said, don't tell me what you told her. I don't want to hear it. But you know what? You pay attention to detail. And with that said, I'm going to share a story with you about detail. When Henry was a young boy in Louisiana, he was always getting into trouble. One morning while waiting for the school bus, he pushed the outhouse over. And he ran off to school. When he returned, his father was waiting for him. Son, did you push the outhouse over in the bayou? Yes, sir. Yes, Father. Henry said, like George Washington, I cannot tell a lie. Harry's father took up his belt and said, all right, son, bend over, I'm going to have to give you a spanking. But Father, George Washington didn't spank his son. He didn't get spanked for what he did. Yes, son, but George's father wasn't in the outhouse when you pushed it over. So you look at things, you attention to detail, you head to manners. To me, it's part of my job as a football coach to make sure my players were prepared to meet everything that forces and comes up. So are you. You are prepared, and it's up to you. You are in job, it's up to you to make sure that it happens. Now, I will tell you the last story about that. At WSU, we said, what do we have to sell? Take pride in what you're selling. Well, I don't know how many of my players ever said anything to their mothers, fathers, or anything else about our sessions. I know they knew it. But I'll tell you one of the nicest compliments over a period of years that I have received from several young ladies, wives of my former players. You would be shocked how many of those young women have come up to me and said, Coach Walden, and they kind of do it away from their husbands. Can I thank you so much for your manners classes? Because if you're dating a 6'4", 255-pound football player and you're about to take him home to meet your mom and dad, it's petrifying just to know. You have any idea how much more comforting it was for those guys to know, those ladies to know that the guy they were taking home had a pretty good understanding of what was basic manners. And I'm proud of that. I think it's meant a lot, and I think we need to get back to it. You want to know the truth, and we'll stay out of politics here. But there's nothing that takes the place of manners. As you grow older and you have children, for God's sake, take time to make sure they know